Welcome back to Tech and Drugs, where we explore the fascinating intersection of data, AI, and life sciences. I'm your host, Thibault, and today we are diving deep with someone whose career is a masterclass in driving innovation at scale. So joining me for our second episode is Ben Szilagyi, a true pioneer in data science and strategy with over 25 years experience leading transformational programs across industry. From his time as VP of Insight, Data, and Experimental Analytics at Roche, where he championed fair data and personalized healthcare, to his recent work as SVP of Data Science at DSM-Firmenich, Ben has consistently turned data into actionable insight, enabling cutting-edge breakthroughs. His expertise spans everything from bioinformatics and multiomics, integration to clinical development, and more. Ben's career embodies the power of aligning data strategy with execution to create tangible value. In this episode, we'll uncover how he shaped ecosystem for data-driven innovation, tackled complex biomedical challenges, and navigated the evolving landscape of data science in pharma and biotech. And we'll tackle a question I'm frequently asked: how do you kick off a digital transformation at scale? Grab your headphone and let's get started. Good morning, Ben, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction.
To get started, and as kind of an icebreaker, can you tell us a bit about yourself and your journey? What brought you to where you are today?
Sure. And actually, it was a few years ago when it really dawned on me why I'm so close to data, but also to healthcare. And I think the main reason for that is that I literally grew up in a hospital. Now, let me tell you a little bit why and how that came. My parents, they were immigrants from Yugoslavia. And when they came to Switzerland, to Basel, they both started to work at the Bürgerspital, the Citizens Hospital, which today is the University Hospital of Basel. And since they both worked at the same place, I was in the childcare. And the childcare was literally inside of the hospital. So I grew up with patients around me. Back in those days, these days it would not be possible anymore, but I was walking the corridors. I went to visit my mother, who was working on the oncology department. The patients were happy to see me, distraction, and a nice conversation. And so just naturally, I was surrounded by nurses and doctors and patients. Later, when I studied again. Part of the university department was again inside of the same hospital. And that's how naturally I almost morphed into my job of biology, mathematics, and then starting in healthcare.
Can you tell us now, how did your journey lead you to your long career at Roche?
Yes, absolutely. So as a student, of course, you need to work. You need to get a little bit of your tuition fees. And I was already as a student, I was within mathematics and biology. I was modeling and I was writing my code. And that led me to start to work in a CRO on clinical studies. So, and you might remember back in those days, there is no job description, right? So you do everything. Yeah, you even design the case report form for the patients. You build the database, double data entry, and then you conduct the analysis. You run the statistical analysis, you program it, and then you create the reports. And well, that's how I started to get into that job. I stayed with CROs for the first 7 years, which was excellent training, because you really, you learn it from scratch, everything. And then I moved into big pharma, which in the beginning was a bit of a shock for me, to be very honest. First of all, because everything is slower in big pharma. But the second thing is much more of a concern, I would say. I'm curious to hear your thoughts there as well. But in those big companies, there is a tendency of high specialization. So you very quickly, you get a job description, first of all, and then you're in a shoebox. And your work becomes very narrow. This is what you have to do, not this and not that, only this. Yeah. And that was for a while okay, but it became very boring. And I then naturally morphed further into areas where, again, I was able to take more of a systems approach and really look at the entire end-to-end chain of, okay, you have a question, you have a problem, you collect the data, and you generate insights. And you do that across a large variety of teams, professions, and you have to engage the entire system.
So was that the motivation for stepping into a leadership role where
Yes,
you had a chance to look
yes,
at things
exactly.
from end to end?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the motivation, to really be able to engage the entire system rather than just, looking at each part of the machine individually.
Roche has made the headlines in the past few years when it comes to their ranking among the large pharma, one of the leading large pharma when it comes to using data and AI. They've been very public about their digital transformation. And obviously, you played a big role in Roche digital transformation. And one of the questions I often get asked is, how do you convince executives to engage in such an ambitious project? I was listening to one of the podcasts from Roche where the CFO was talking about already spending 2.2 billion in their digital transformation, which is great. Now I have a number actually. When people ask how much does it cost to do a digital transformation in a big pharma, it's more than 2 billion. So can you walk us through that? Because I find this fascinating.
No, absolutely. And there is no, let's say there were several key points in that history, and it's my version of the history. Let's be very clear
Yeah.
on this. But there is no magic button. But there are a few important things to note. The first one is that the former CEO of Roche, Severin Schwan, himself has a very strong affinity to data. So he himself naturally was very engaged in that topic. And every year on the executive committee, they had a recurring topic about what is the next thing. And obviously, you have those conversations, you have big data topics, then you have AI, and et cetera, et cetera. And we in biometrics kept telling him repeatedly, you need to address the foundations. You need to address the foundations. You cannot just focus on the icing of the cake on top. You need to address the foundations. And he eventually said, all right, well, show me, do it. And you do that by starting small. That's my most important advice to anyone. Don't boil the ocean. Don't go with a big budget plan and a big announcement out there. You will spread yourself thin. You are not focused. Focused means you have to say 10 times no before you say 1 times yes. That's focus, saying no to something. And you start small. You pick one use case, one. Yeah. Forget about budget. Forget about processes even. The entire machine will try to get you into doing the things the way we do it, right? But this is something new. You want to do something new. And so you really have to, as a leader of the program, and I underestimated that, by the way. One of the main things as the leader of such a program is to protect this initiative against the corporate machine that will expect you to come with a yearly budget plan, expect to come you with a team charter, expect you to come with a waterfall roadmap. You can spend the entire year doing that, and you haven't done a single iota for your program. Nothing has happened, yeah? But you're busy. You're very busy doing that whole thing. And so we did the opposite of that, yeah? We left all of that on the side, and we had a small team, and we delivered on that one single use case, and we showed how good looks like.
If you're at liberty to talk about it, tell us what was this program and how do you pick this program? Because I'm sure it's not random. You need to prioritize.
Yes,
And having been through similar exercise, there are literally thousands of stuff that you can start that are
absolutely.
all equally appealing, to be honest. How do you pick your first program and then focus on that? And how do you say no to everything else?
I think the decision-making process evolves as the program evolves. I mean, we literally started with about 12 people. Yeah. At the end, I mean, the program is still ongoing, by the way, today. My successor is still successfully leading the program, and they just got a breakthrough award from Pharma development. But we were 12 people in the beginning, 12 crusaders who believed in the good of what we are doing. And we were very opportunistic. We picked a use case where we had a strong sponsor, a scientist who said, look, I have that question. Can you find me a prognostic safety signal on the genome of the patients? Because I can't even ask that question at the moment. Yeah. So give me a prognostic signal which is correlated to a clinical outcome. They were not able to ask that question. And so we went to the therapeutic area, we dug up old data, very old data, that was there only for regulatory purposes, nothing else. We found the samples, the tissue samples, and we repurposed them. We ran whole genome sequencing over it. We then took the old clinical data and, well, how do you integrate it? It's not, there are many different ways how to do that with high dimensional data. So it was clunky. It was extremely non-elegant. It took us about 8 months' time to do it, but we found a signal. We found it. And that was fascinating. That was fascinating to see the reaction of the organization, because my colleague and I, we then went to one of the R&D boards and we presented on the program. And we were, it's one of these usual leadership board meetings where the team sits there for the whole day and then teams come in, right? And we were probably team number 16 or something, late afternoon. The guys were caffeinated, okay, but they were tired, yeah. And you could see half of them were engaged in the conversation. The other ones were politely trying to camouflage how they are looking at their mobile phones, And my colleague and I, Laurent and I, we were naive in our approach of thinking, let's talk about fair principles and standards. And, you could see how, until we mentioned the signal. The moment, and this is important, Thibault, the moment we mentioned the signal, all the phones went down, all the heads went up. And I said, can you repeat, just what did you found a signal on our old data? Yeah? I said, yeah, can you do that again? We have old data for oncology. And so that's how it evolved. We went from one therapeutic area to the next. Eventually, we needed some governance, decision-making process, because to your point, how do you make a decision what to tackle and what not? But we really, over the 6-7 years, we built broad and deep data marts, therapeutic area specific, across almost the entire portfolio. It was amazing, but you had to show how good looks like. And every single time, with every single data mart, you started with a question. Don't go and just curate all the data and hope, fingers crossed, and the insights will eventually come down. That's not how it works. You have to be very purposeful from the beginning with the problem first, and then you go and deliver it.
You talked about looking into old data. Is Roche doing something better than the rest of the industry regarding its old data, or did you have like the typical challenges in looking into all data, that they were not necessarily produced with that in mind, that one day you will reuse them. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. And this is an extremely important point, which actually the executives picked up as well eventually, when we talked to them. Retrospective data curation. Bless the data curators' hearts. You need to be a very special person to do that. Yeah. And every data curator who does that deserves your respect and your love and your admiration, because this is very hard work. It's very frustrating. It's very tedious, and it's not efficient. It is not sustainable. So yes, you can do that in very specific cases for very specific reasons, but you eventually will have to start to think, okay, how can we stop chasing our tail? How can we start to get the data from the beginning in a fair way? So that as you generate the data, as you ingest the data, you process the data, you store and share the data, you get it from the beginning right. Instead of permanently, engaging a half an army of data curators to go and correct your sins from the past.
When you were talking about your first leadership meeting where you started with FAIR, people were not interested, then you demonstrated that you could get signals, then you started to scale up your initiative, and now you're talking about creating fair data at the point of production. So how did you get to this point? Because I assume that it kind of changes a lot of processes in the organization if you want to produce fair data at scale. So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, be very clear. It was a fantastic team. It was an amazing team, and we had amazing experts who were part of the core team. Yeah, so this is number one. You need good people. But then there is another aspect that I completely underestimated. When my boss Jeff asked me to whether I would lead this program, I said, yeah, sure, I can do that. Because decades of experience as a biometrician, of course I can do that. I know data, I know analysis. I had no idea, Thibault. I had no idea. Seriously, yeah, because the majority of my job had nothing to do with data, had nothing to do with FAIR, to your point, had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with human psychology, with trust. There are data modalities that are being generated by specialist teams. Okay. I mentioned whole genome sequencing, that specialized team that repurposed the samples and ran and sequenced them. They sat in California. The team who was doing the use case sat here in Basel. What do you want with my data? Who are you? You don't understand my data. Yeah. So you come in, right, with FAIR principles and processes, and you go and you see the clinical operations team. First of all, they don't even understand you. You use, of course you speak English, they speak English, but that doesn't mean that you speak the same language. Yeah. So what it required from my leadership team, from myself, is that I tune into people's realities, into their language, into their aspirations, into their KPIs, into their challenges. Yeah. So that I started to build empathy and understand what drives them, what is in it for them. Why should they care about, okay, Ben comes in and says, you have to do this now. Sure. Stand in the queue. Yeah, I'm busy. So it has, this is the important bit. Yeah. And it's I see it quite often not being expressed explicitly enough, that the human aspect in these transformational programs, the human aspect is on top of your mind. It's not an afterthought. Oh yeah, let's get a change manager coming in. Change manager, yeah, you are going to change now the mindset of these people because their mindset is wrong. That's not going to work. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I think we could do an entire show just on the human aspect of leading this transformation. But so going back to FAIR, so what does it mean concretely then? Once you get people to trust you and understand that okay, FAIR is the right thing to do, and we understand what FAIR is. And I'm sure you've seen the original FAIR paper that describe the philosophy. It's more philosophy paper than a recipe. It doesn't tell you step by step, this is what you need to do in your organization. And by the way, if you want to write a book on that, I'm sure many people will read it. But then, so how did this translate into your organization into, going from a philosophy to a recipe? Can you walk us through that?
That was the same approach like with our retrospective data marts. We were thinking big, but we started very focused and step by step small. And what we basically built, I still remember today, the core team meeting, where we said, we need to build what we called a FAIR engine. We called it a FAIR engine, yeah? And we cut it into segments where you have data ingestion, you have data processing, you have the analysis, whatever you're doing with the data, right? And then you have what we called not data storage, but data sharing. So at the end, you prepare your data to the best way possible so that it can be shared. Yeah? And then within each segment, you really start to break down what are the required elements that you can put in place in order to make this engine as smooth as possible and remove as much manual intervention. And then you start to build. You start to really build it. Yeah.
So talking about building, there is always this question when you're leading a team that is developing or implementing digital solution, this building versus buying. How did you tackle that? And was there a lot of things out there that you could just get and implement versus building internally? And on the building internally, I'd love to get your thought also on, it's a pharma company. It's not a software development company. So I'm assuming also that it means quite a lot of changes regarding on how you get the right people, how you organize them, etc. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I wish really I could say you can buy it. And I had recent conversations with head of R&D developers of software companies where they asked, hey, what is your wish? What can we deliver for you that would make your life easier? And I told them, guys, please help us with this. Never mind your AI tools and your cool algorithms and data visualization tools. That's all great. But help us working in the trenches. And unfortunately, this is a shout out here to the community. Guys, please, because that's the hard work. And that's where companies still, unfortunately, have to build a lot on their own. So this is, we had certain elements that we had to build on our own because nothing was available. We were, of course, data repositories, you have them, right? They're out there, containerized, standardized, wonderful. So don't bother with that. But specific data ingestion tools, knowledge graphs, you will have publicly available knowledge graphs and taxonomies, but you also have your internal knowledge. Yeah, you have your internal IP relevant information that you also need to modelize and bind into knowledge graphs, ontologies, and that's homework. You need to do that. We had a fantastic team. Martin, you know who you are, amazing guy, Martin Romacher. But this is something you have to invest in, unfortunately, still. Yeah.
So talking about teams, that's one of the things I was mentioning. So Historically, pharmaceutical organizations are not the first place where talented developer or data science people wanted to work. I think it's changing now. I mean, I see a lot of big tech companies investing in life sciences. So now I
Yes.
think everyone sees that as an attractive space. But when it started, this kind of initiative, I don't think that it was already, the hot job for developers in pharma. So how did you manage to build the team and build the culture of doing software development within a pharmaceutical organization?
Yeah. I guess not only here in Switzerland, but everywhere we are fighting for talent, right? And there are the big tech companies that are hoovering up the talents already from the universities, and you're fighting, to attract and retain uh, excellence and talent. The one point I think that which is relevant is purpose.
Yeah.
What is your purpose? Why do you wake up in the morning? Yeah. I don't wake up in the morning because of fair data. I wake, fair data is an enabler, right? So what is your purpose? Yeah. Are you waking up to fight cancer? Are you waking up, yeah, to fight Alzheimer's? Are you waking up to provide the population with healthy food? Yeah, with supplements, yeah, that are healthy, good for you. So put that at the center of your mission. Everything else is an enabler. And I think that's what generates momentum. Yeah. When you find that safety signal, what does that mean? What does that mean for patients? Yeah. Again, it comes back to where I come from. I asked several times also team members, when was it the last time you were in a hospital? Not for yourself, by the way, thank God not. But are you aware? Are you aware what it means to go and take a sample and wait for a diagnosis? You go home and they will tell you, we will call you when we have the results. Yeah. Every single hour is an eternity. That's the reality. That's what we work for. And that's what you have to put into the center. When you have big data marts, every single line in that data mart is a human being, is a story. Yeah. You have an oncology database. Yeah. That's the reality. Yeah. And this is the purpose, what you are there for. Everything else, your knowledge, your technology, your processes are in service of that purpose.
I think people, including myself, we are drawn to this space, to life science, because our contribution is for the greater good. It's not an overstatement, it's real.
No, it's real. And you see, we come and talk about fair day. Fair. F stands for findable. Are you kidding me? I mean, this patient joined a clinical study in the hope to develop a new treatment, and you are saying that it takes special effort to keep that patient's data findable? Really? I mean, imagine you go back to that patient who just gave blood, yeah, and some samples, yeah, and say, it will take special effort to keep your data findable. Oh, and by the way, accessible. This is not a conversation to be had, right? And so that's what fair means.
Can we step back a little bit? Because at some point you were talking about organization focusing more on the inside than on data quality. And when we had our initial conversation, you were talking about the inverted pyramid problems, and I really like this approach. Can you walk us through that?
Yep. If you imagine the Pyramid of Giza, right? It stands there for thousands of years, and there's a very good reason for it. Yeah. It has a very big foundation, and then it goes towards the top. And if you think about a data pyramid, it's the same. It should be the same in theory. So at the foundation, you have fair data, high quality data, following FAIR principles, ALCOA principles, etc. Data is then being derived into information. So you derive information from data. That's your next segment of the pyramid. And information can then be synthesized into knowledge, which is your next segment. You ruminate over your knowledge, you compare your current knowledge retrospectively with what you acquired before, and you eventually come up with one insight based on that amount of data and information. That's your pyramid, right? So you get a few insights on the top from a lot of data on the bottom. And that's why it's a pyramid. If I look into the industry, what I find in terms of attention, in terms of aspirations, in terms of investment, is an inverted pyramid. Everybody focuses on the top. Even the software industry, right? Oh, we develop new algorithms. Great. Your algorithm will be only as good as your data. Yeah. It's an inverted pyramid. Very little focus on high quality data on the bottom. Everybody jumps on the top. Everybody wants to be the next generation algorithm developer, AI, etc., etc. But it's an inverted pyramid and it's not sustainable. And so this is why, if people ask me, Ben, you keep hammering down that data topic. Well, that's the reason why. That's exactly the reason why. Of course, the top of the pyramid is cool, but in order to really generate those insights and really be beneficial for science, you need to work on the basis.
So you talked about your experience at Roche, where the CEO at that time was receiving this message quite well and was sensitive to
Yes.
that. But broadly speaking, and not only at Roche, but in your other organization, how do you educate executives and boards to really understand this issue and make sure that they shift the priorities or have the priorities in the right order?
And by the way, that's my view on the world, and I'm still learning. Yeah. But it comes down to language. It comes down to language. And this is a challenge for us data scientists, by the way. Data science over the last few years really changed in the way of attention. I mean, you and I, we are about the same age. And you remember 10 years ago, we were in the back seats. The data scientists, they're the data geeks. Yeah, leave them alone. Yeah. Well, the world has changed. And so that means we have to change as well. And we have to start to learn how to communicate. We have to start to learn how to communicate value. We have to rub shoulders with marketing. Those marketing guys, I'll be very honest with you, in the past, that was the dark side. That was the wrong way to use the force, right? It's manipulative.
I'll stop you. I spent 6 years in marketing.
Well, there you go. but no, there is an art. There's an art in explaining complex things in a way that is meaningful and valuable for you. And you can't just expect that the whole world around you understands immediately what you want to say. And that's basically our job. That's the data scientist's job, to really, again, put yourself into the other person's shoes and ask yourself, why would that person spend time with me?
I have a funny story about data scientists communicating. So in my previous organization, I was working with a large data science team, and they were often telling me about large language models, BERT at that time, Google BERT. And to be honest, for a couple of years, I was like, why do I have to care about that? And then of course, ChatGPT was launched, and that used large language model, and I was like, okay, that's why I have to care. And I think for me, it's a great illustration of, you can talk about something very important, but if you don't put yourself in the shoes of the person you're talking to, they will not understand how important is the thing that you're talking about.
To your point, yeah, my colleagues talked about RDF. All right, why? resource description format, I think that's what it stands for. Why should I have to bother about it, right? And only after some iterations and discussions, I started to think, oh, wait a second. Okay. And, the recent post I made about Paris and the second best cheese, that we had a funny discussion around. That's what it means, yeah? It's meaning, it's relationships. But if you can't translate that to a non-technical person, nothing will happen. And you will spin in the air. Yeah, you will have no traction whatsoever. And that's tragic in itself.
Everybody is talking about AI, but what you emphasize is the need for data quality. So do you think that nowadays the message gets a little bit lost?
Unfortunately, I think it's human nature that the best way we learn is when we get a bloody nose. So here's how I learned fair data and the necessity of fair data. Back in my career, I was a lead analyst on a blockbuster drug. And that blockbuster drug, from one day to the other, had a safety signal, a detrimental safety signal. And the FDA came with a black box warning. Boom. Yeah. Now that woke up everyone in the company. It woke up the CEO. And we were all pulled into a war room. And we started to turn on old servers because we had to pool all clinical data available to run a meta-analysis over it. And now you can imagine what that means. Old servers with non-annotated data sets that you have to start. So, but long story short, you get a bloody nose and you start to understand, all right, there's a good reason why prospectively you want to verify data. Same thing with AI. God forbid, but you get a recommendation from an AI bot, which is nonsensical, and you trust it, and the damage is done. A self-driving car will make a wrong decision. Damage is done. Yeah? And so hopefully we will not have too many of these cases before we start to think, all right, the algorithm is only as smart as the teacher who was teaching the algorithm. And the teacher's knowledge, the teacher's ethical qualities as well, moral, ethical qualities matter in order to develop a student, develop an algorithm to a point where he or she will, it can draw the right conclusions.
Yeah, you talk about fair data, and this is in some circles widely discussed, but what you're arguing is that it's not enough. What additional component like metadata, context, taxonomy do you think are essential?
First of all, fair data needs to come along with ALCOA. The ALCOA principle has been published by CFR 21 Part 11. It stands for very reasonable requirements. Attributable data. You can attribute it to a person, you can attribute it to a creator. Legible. Data should be legible. It should be contemporaneous. I mean, okay, maybe as a historian, it's interesting to look at 200-year-old data, but yeah. Original. Don't have 300 copies of the same data flying around. We know that exists, right? And how many versions you have. And it should be accurate. And then the plus. So besides of FAIR, you have ALCOA. And then, yes, absolutely, you need metadata that describes data. And it basically tells you all the required information about the data that you need to know. When has it been collected? Where? From which study? What are the documents associated to that data? Analysis plan, etc., so that you understand, is this data even useful for me or not? Because a blank data sheet as such will not give you much information on this. You start to pool the data that should not be pooled based on the question that you have, and then you think you can have results. And then, of course, taxonomy, next level. hierarchical classification of data, and there are examples out there in the clinical world. You have MEDRA, for example, the MEDRA dictionary, the WHO dictionary, MEDRA for adverse events. You classify adverse events so that you can even run an analysis of adverse events, or on concomitant medication with the WHO dictionary on drugs. And drugs also have a classification. And then last but not least, we already mentioned ontologies, where you start to put data points into relation with each other. And that's where data really starts to sing. Yeah. You have a biomarker, all right. How is that biomarker associated to what clinical outcomes? There might be several ones, right? Glucose. Fair enough. What studies do have a measurement on this? Yeah. Etc. What units do you have that measure this value? Etc. Etc. So once you start to put data points into relationship with each other that are tool agnostic, systems agnostic, then you can start to really have a knowledge platform where many different applications can start to interact with each other.
What about knowledge graph?
Well, yes, absolutely. Yeah. This knowledge graphs is one of the ways how to describe relationships between. I used the example of Paris being the capital of a country, but it's also the daughter of a very rich hotel chain owner. And how should the machine know what you mean by Paris, right? 20 years ago, Paris was a 5-character string. That's it. And if you would have searched for Paris, you would have received the homepage, which has Paris written 300 times on a single page with no meaning whatsoever. And these days now, the machine not only knows what Paris means, but what it means in context to you. Because Thibault might have a different reason why he is searching for Paris than I have, or my wife has. Yeah.
Moving on, so we talked about technical stuff, but now let's talk a bit about cross-disciplinary challenges. So as you said, like 10 years ago, the data scientists were the guys, in one of the building, and people did not even know where the building was. Now they are at the center of many projects.
Yeah.
So now you kind of expect skills that goes beyond their core expertise. So you talk about the dark side of marketing. So I would argue that data scientists need to become good marketer of their
Yes.
project, but
Yes.
then they need to work with legal.
Yes.
I worked so much with legal in the past year, and I know why I didn't become a lawyer, but that was very important to do that. And
Absolutely.
then you have GDPR, you have a new EU AI Act, etc., etc. So how do you see those? It's quite a lot of skills that are required for one person. How do you navigate that, and how do you evolve as a person, and also how do you work with your team so that they evolve and get those skills that are necessary now?
Yeah. Well, there's good news around the corner here, because if I imagine that we would have to acquire all these skills back in the days when we were in university, good luck. Yeah? Because you physically have to walk to the university library. Then you look through the registers if the book is here. If the book is not here, you have to reserve the book and wait until the other person brings the book back. And then you go home and you read. And now you just open YouTube and you get tutorials. There are classes on LinkedIn take. So the skills that you have to develop, and you mentioned a lot of them, very, very relevant skills. These days, you really have available tutorials for most of them. But it takes time. You have to study, and you need curiosity. Man, I mean, we are scientists, and curiosity is at the heart of scientific motivation. We are curious people, and so if you can foster within your team, you give permission. First of all, you give permission to learn, and learning also means making mistakes. I don't like that word. I don't like that word. If you watch a child learning to walk, that child doesn't make mistakes. That child learns. Yeah. And okay, you tumble over and then you stand up again. So if you in the beginning are struggling with even understanding what the lawyer is trying to tell you, which I was there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is hard. That guy spent years at university studying law and developing a language that is very specific for that discipline. But give yourself permission, give your team permission to really dive into these different disciplines and reward them, applaud. Yeah, because to your point, data science is only as relevant and impactful as we can work together cross-disciplinary these days.
The past 18, 24 months have been incredibly exciting, I think, for our space. Lots of technical development, lots of investment. How do you see this evolving, in the next 12, 24 months and beyond? So what really excites you about what's coming up?
I really feel we are a little bit in a world now, like in the 80s, 90s, where the internet started to become a thing, And I still remember journals writing articles. How relevant will the internet be for companies in the future? And there was a debate about that. You think like, wow, back in those days, who would have thought, right? And we are a little bit in the same space here where you think, how relevant is data, AI, algorithms going to be for us in the future? It's hard to predict, very hard to predict, but what I find extremely exciting, and I'm very positive about it, is that I recently started to see movements towards more transparency. That's the one thing. Transparency in terms of what does the algorithm do? Not to mention certain search engines, but certain search engines have an algorithm that can literally make or break you as a company in terms of how high do you show up, right? And so there's power in there. And if you're not transparent about it, then that can become a problem. And so I think transparency is the one big thing. The second big thing for me is ownership of your data. Again, how many social platforms are out there that are for free? If it's for free, then you are not the customer, you are the product, and your data will be used. And it's often not going to be used to benefit you in the first place, but to benefit the company, to make profit. And then last but not least, tied to ownership, it's control. So if that triangle starts to work, and I see movement really in competing platforms coming up that really put us as people again at the center and what is beneficial for us. I really think we're going to see amazing things, but in the next few months already down the line.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think things are accelerating so much more than before, than things that will take a couple of years now, or things that we think are science fiction, 6 months from now, they are not anymore. So we are almost an hour already, and I think we could continue this conversation forever. So, maybe we'll agree on the second episode. But would you have any concluding thoughts or advice that you will give to your younger self, before embarking on this journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Myself, I would have said already in earlier days, engage cross-functionally more. Yeah, I have to now, obviously, just like you, right? We talk now to our IP attorneys. We talk cross-functionally with marketing, etc., sales. I could have done that earlier. I think that would have helped me a big way. So if I could have a chat with my younger self, this is definitely one thing that I would have advised me to do. In more general terms, if I talk to a young data scientist, I would say two things that are really important. The one is learn a domain. And what I mean by that is study a data domain and understand the data itself. And whether this is biology, medicine, finance, never mind. But if you don't understand the business that you're analyzing, if you don't understand the data in itself, you will not have the impact. You will not have the impact that you could have. So that's the one thing. And the second thing is code. Learn to code. I know there are automatic code generators now. I had lunch recently with a young, fantastic talent data scientist, and she told me, hey, you wouldn't imagine how little coding is being done at universities these days because code generators do the coding. And I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem because learning to code is a neuroformative process where you learn a specific way of how to break down a problem into manageable problems and then solve it in an unambiguous way. So it disciplines your mind. Never mind what language you will later program in or use, but learn to code. Learn the domain and learn to code. Those two things.
Thanks. I think these are, very, very, very interesting and very good recommendations for anyone listening. And thanks a lot for this conversation. I mean, for me, it was very informative, very fun, and well, I'm sure we'll get lots of questions and and comments on this episode. So, if you had fun and if you're open to it, let's see next year if we can do another one.
Absolutely.
So, Ben, thanks a lot,
Thibault,
and
my pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
You.
Bye-bye.
Bye.